Greetings, cartoon connoisseurs, and welcome to the Animation Conversation, where we explore the art form from pencils to pixels. And now, here are your hosts, Rusty Shackleford and F.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Animation Conversation. I'm Rusty here with my co-host.
What's up, party people? It's your old pal, F.
And I'm going to let you take it away, F. I'm going to let you go ahead and do the intro here.
Well, once again, I just couldn't be more delighted to have this person on the show. She's a prolific writer in the world of animation and is one of our very first truly relevant guests in that she has done stuff with Barbie, but she's also, on a very personal note, delighted my daughter with the show Ada Twist Scientist. She was a co-worker with me both on Chalk Zone and Yin Yang Yo. So, without further ado, here's my good friend, Aydrea Walden.
Hi, everybody.
Adria, it is so good. It is so good to see you again.
Yes, it's wonderful to see you. And it's wonderful
see, I think this podcast, the reason I agreed to do this podcast was almost entirely to, have a bargaining chip with which to have a face-to-face conversation with old friends again. It is wonderful to see you.
I thought you were going to say you did it solely for the purpose of getting to talk to me personally and me only again, in which case I was going to say that tracks.
I wasn't gonna come right out and say that because Eric Trueheart is sort of prone to big bouts of weeping, and I didn't want him to
cry a lot.
Yeah. So I didn't want to do that to him. So I mentioned a few of the things that you worked on, but can you give us the rundown of some of your proudest work?
Oh, my proudest work. Well, I don't want to leave anybody out. Sorry, my cat's making a bunch of noise. Of course, she's been silent under the blankets all day. Now she's making a bunch of noise. My proudest work, I mean, everything I've worked on has been a wonderful and a great experience in its own way. Yeah, I mean, it started with Chalk Zone and moved on to writing wise, Yin Yang Yo. I did another show in between them, but I was only doing production on that. And then the last few years have kind of been full of a lot of fun young animation for young audiences. Eureka on Disney Junior, Barbie It Takes Two on Netflix, Thomas and Friends, Pete the Cat, a Nickelodeon show that I can't talk about yet, but that was about a year and a quarter of time. The Hey Gay J on Disney Junior, which I also helped develop and then got to write on. It's been a bunch of animated stuff.
Well, and you yourself are a performer, and tell us a little bit about that before we go into the deep dive back into animation. I want to hear a little bit because it's something that I see you work on a lot, and it delights me every time. So
yeah, I'm definitely interested in it.
I think you know what I'm talking about. So can you talk a little?
Yeah,
bit
it's
about
a lot of it's the most current stuff that I looked up to. So all the stuff that you've done, like I try to stay away from the animation stuff. I wanted to see everything else that you had done because I was more interested in that. So it was actually, yeah. It's really cool stuff.
I wanna get this in so that we can then also spend the whole rest of the time talking about cartoons, because that of course is why people tuned in. But I want them also to know about.
Are we talking about Black Girl in the Big Dress?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I didn't want to assume because I had a whole different digital thing that I did before Black Girl in the Big Dress. But Black Girl in the Big Dress is my live action digital series about an awkward Victorian era cosplayer trying to date in 21st century Los Angeles with her 19th century ideals. So in real life, I go to balls and teas and things like that, dressed up as a Victorian lady, or sometimes a Regency lady, or sometimes a Marie Antoinette styled lady. And honestly, I wanted an excuse to write some jokes and wear those costumes more often. So I made a web series about it that did pretty well. And I'm really proud of it. And it's great. And everyone should go to a ball. They're really fun.
I gotta say, this is one of those things that's outside of anything that I would ordinarily just sort of choose to. But you are so funny, and you are so clearly in your element in the whole thing. It's one of those things that you can tell is a passion project, and therefore it just it comes through how much fun you seem to be having, and that just by
you.
itself is entertaining.
It was fun. I basically was like, I'm going to be in this. So I'm just going to write entirely things that I want to do, except for the eating. There's one eating scene, which I will never write for myself again. Eating on camera is never attractive. God bless all the actors who do it all the time. And it's very uncomfortable to have to do take after take after take to continue eating food that is now cold and has been on set for hours. It's not fun. But other than that, it was just like, what do I want to do? And I did it.
Well, it ties into, one of the sort of recurring themes that we talk about on this show when we try and dissect, what makes a good cartoon is it's sort of what makes a good anything. And that is when someone is having fun making something, it shows in the work. And it also, I've made the argument time and time again, Black Girl Big Dress is not, if I didn't know you, I don't know that I would have gravitated towards it just organically. But because I did, I saw it, and it's the theme of good is good. It doesn't matter that I'm never going to dress up as a Victorian, lady.
You don't know that. You don't know
Yeah.
that.
Well, okay, you're right. I'll never say never, but currently I don't have any plans to go to a ball dressed in a big gown or anything like that.
Sure.
And yet I found it highly entertaining. And again, one of the recurring themes here is good, and good usually comes from someone who's actually invested in the work that they're producing.
Truly.
Now, speaking of the work that you've produced, let's go back in time. Let's actually go back to, you've made a career in animation as a writer. Yes. And many people that I talk to on Twitter and that we hear from with regard to this podcast, boy, lots of people want to be writers in animation. So take us back first to, little Aydrea, and how did the writing bug bite you first?
How did it get there? The first thing I think is really interesting is I always kind of loved writing, which I don't even really remember. Like when I found, my parents recently sent me all the like ephemera from childhood that I want to hold on to anymore. And I found things I wrote when I was like 4 and 5 years old, and it still sounds like me. So I'm like, oh, I've always been this. Whoops. But I think the connection to film and television for me specifically was, and I cannot remember if we've even like, I'm sure we have talked like this, but the original connection was like, if you looked at my life growing up from the outside, it looked really good. Like we lived in a nice neighborhood. I was never like hungry or cold. I got, a car when I turned 16. I got braces when I needed them, stuff like that. But if you looked at like the inside, if you like open up the doors to my home, I describe it as like being a broken music box. House was really cute on the outside, but inside, a lot of stuff was like not going great. There were a lot of mental health issues in my family that manifested in some really challenging ways. I was also an only child, and I didn't go to my neighborhood school. And my part of the overprotection that my family did, I wasn't super allowed to have like a lot of friends. I wasn't allowed to have people over. I was kind of Rapunzeled up in my room. And so my world was very small, and film and television were my windows to like more. And it was through watching stuff that I was like, oh my gosh, there's more than this. There are more places to go. There are more people to see. There's more experiences to have. Everything from like, maybe, oh, there's a France. That seems cool. Maybe I'll go there someday. Or like the flute. That seems fun. Maybe I'll play that. And so I fell in love with film and television. And then, sometimes you would see characters dealing with things, and that was very helpful as well. I grew up in the era of like very special episodes of shows. And so there'd be very special episodes, and those were very helpful.
Well, what were some of your favorite shows when you first sort of came to this awakening?
I mean, I was a big fan of the TGIF lineup. They were animated, but the TGIF lineup, I mean, Fresh Prince, Boy Meets World, Family Matters, all of that. Because again, I didn't have any friends. So Friday nights, it was me and the TV. And that block of programming was like pretty solid. Like,
for sure,
and found families dealing with stuff. Yeah.
These kids today don't realize that there was a period of time where your favorite show might fall smack dab in the middle of a block of shows that were garbage. So when
Yeah.
when a network came along with a block of shows that was actually good, you were like, "Oh, this is awesome."
It was great. It was wonderful. And that's kind of when I discovered film and TV. And then Saturday mornings were the same. Like I would, those, the era of Saturday morning cartoons. I was I'm like, I'm so girly now, but then I was very like Transformers, He-Man, and Garfield. Loved Garfield so much. Don't know why, but I also had the books. I really loved Garfield.
Oh, I did.
Um,
I did too, actually. Get like the original Garfield comic strip, which, if you
yeah.
look at the oldest ones, they're kind of dark.
Uh,
No, I that was one of the first comic strips that I copied as a kid and tried to like sort of emulate.
oh,
I lost interest as time went on, but that's right. I forgot you were a Transformers fan, but I'm going to out you on this. You got a thing for Starscream, do you not?
I did have a thing for Starscream. Yes, I had a thing for Star. I felt like he was really misunderstood.
Well, he was
And
abused, to be sure.
I felt like he was just trying his best. And what was
Well,
his
he was
boss?
trying his best to kill his boss.
But that's because his boss was mean to him, and Starscream would try his best. And I felt like his boss, what was his boss's name? Why am I blanking?
Megatron.
Megatron would never appreciate the work that Starscream. That was how I felt. I also had a crush on Robin Hood the Fox, and Lambert the Sheepish Lion. I also had a big crush on.
Wow.
And Valkor the Luck Dragon. Also had a big crush on that thing.
So not so much into humans.
Well, they were a lot of stuff for kids were anthropomorphic other things, but Valkor was so sweet.
True.
He was so sweet too.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that. So when it came around to getting a career, I was like, I don't know what this is, Phil. I don't know. I'm from Corpus Christi, Texas. I don't know. There's no one. There may be people from, I don't know what's going on there production wise now, but certainly when I was there was no one was shooting except for Heather's, I guess, that shop. No one in my family did anything like this. So I was just like, I want to do that. And I don't know how. And now I do.
So what would you say was sort of the first big step to doing precisely that? I mean, I imagine you sitting around writing.
Yes, I wrote a lot. Yes. Well, the first step was a different career is what it was. So I was able to put together, I want to write, and I wanted it to be for big brands. I never really had like an independent vibe to the things I wanted to write. And so I knew
You're like me, you like an audience, right?
I like an audience and insurance. And so I wanted big brands. And so the first thing I did was journalism. This was back when newspapers were a going concern. And so that was what my degree is in. Also went to college for, and that was my first career. And I was like, well, this is great. I'll write stories and I worked for the Seattle Times Company, so a big brand, and I was writing, great, amazing. But I just never really lost the bug to do film and TV. And I was still writing. I'd write scripts that are terrible. Oh my goodness. In high school, I wrote a lot of plays, and every single play, it did not matter what the setup was. Every play ended with the teenage female protagonist dying in someone's arms, who was like, I should have loved you when I had the chance.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. It didn't matter what the setup was, but that was the ending of every single play I wrote in high school. So then in college, or after college, I was working in newspapers, met a boy. He was also working in news. He also wanted to come to LA. And so between the two of us, we had enough moxie to be like, let's quit our jobs. Because we were young and we didn't know. So we quit our jobs, and he had some friends who were in LA already. So we had a little bit of connection. So we came to LA. I promptly broke up with him and started my journey to working. I got my first job because when I was living in Washington, I was living in Yakima, Washington at the time, and I did a play. I did Godspell. My soloist turned back oh man for any Godspell heads out there. And while I was working on the play, a woman was like, oh, my son lives in Burbank. You're moving to Burbank. You should call my son. But her vibe was like, my unmarried son lives in Burbank.
Right.
Call my son. And I was like, no, I will never call your son. I'm going to be a professional lady. And then I got to Burbank and I was very unemployed. So I was like, I'll call that guy. And that guy had a crush on a production manager at Nickelodeon. So he introduced me to her, and she and I got along super great. And they happened to be hiring a writer's assistant at the time. And that is how I got that job. And I was an assistant.
Yes, you were an assistant on Chalk Zone.
I was an assistant on Chalk Zone, yes.
Where you met a young, awkward John Fountain.
I'm very excited. Ally John Fountain.
I was very excited. To me, this was Kermit the Frog visits the big city. I was in awe of everybody. All right, so we're back. We had to sort of switch our situation a little bit here because the internet chose to be a jerk to us. But Aydrea, you're back. One of the things I wanted to sort of get your confirmation on, because we were discussing your early career as a writer and as a storyteller.
Mhm.
One of the things I have crowed about this constantly, and nobody ever wants to follow this advice, but when people ask me, how do I become a good writer? My answer is always take journalism. Can you back me up on that?
I actually think that my career as a journalist was helpful in a number of ways. One, you are telling stories every single day. Like, that's the job. And you're telling stories about something you may not know about every single day. So you kind of have to, and you're telling stories for a wide audience every single day. So you kind of have to get up to speed on things quickly, communicate about it extremely clearly, which the best stories are extremely clear, even if there's like really big world building or all kinds of stuff like that. The best stories are very clear at their core. And the other thing that I think was the sneaky skill was that when I was a reporter, especially because I was a newspaper reporter, my work every day would literally be thrown in the garbage, and you'd have to start over from scratch every day. And it wasn't, this was I started my professional career in the year 2000. So like, obviously the internet was around, but like every single thing wasn't archived. Like, newspapers didn't put every piece of their content online. So there were many stories where you never, it's not like you could just keep referring to the link that lasted forever. It was balled up and thrown in the trash. It was, it became cat litter liner or birdcage liner. And you had to pick yourself up and start again. And you couldn't rest on any laurels. You just had to keep generating stories, and you had to do it quickly, because in newspapers, you literally went to press. And there was a moment at the end of the day where it's like, we got to hit the button on that big machine. You have to be done. You cannot be noodling to find the right word. You cannot, just need to do one more thing. You must be finished, because we have to hit the button on the thing to print.
Well, and
all that stuff was really sticky skills.
Yeah, and in addition to all of that, now I hope everyone who claims to want to be a writer in animation just listen to everything she said, because when I say it, nobody wants to listen to me. You are forced as a journalist and as a newspaper writer, you're forced to write concisely. You don't get to indulge in "it was a dark and stormy night," and you don't get to be all prosy.
No.
You don't get to go all Tolkienian and describe every tree branch down to its atoms. You got to get to the who, what, when, where, and why.
Yes.
And I feel like, and it's one of the reasons why I think when you first showed me your writing, I could almost tell. I'm like, okay, this person, because you can tell people who are used to indulging themselves in the writing, because it goes on and on forever, and versus people who know what it's like to write efficiently. And I remember that being something I noticed about yours. And so
thank you.
People, if you're out there and you want to be a writer, please take journalism. It's boot camp.
It's helpful.
You learn to be tougher as a writer than you will ever truly need to be in your life. So anyway, so you got hired on Chalk Zone because somebody wanted to hook you up with their son, and who can blame them? You were just cute as the Dickens.
I mean, I'm a real delight.
Yeah.
I will make an excellent daughter-in-law one of these days.
You were one of those people that I feel like at a time, it was certainly a fun time at Nickelodeon because
It
cartoons
was.
going on right there.
Yes.
We had Larry Huber right there, Rob Renzetti, Butch Hartman, all these folks
Yeah.
were
Yes.
around. But even Rob Renzetti described it as sort of a CalArts mafia that
Yeah.
sort of ran the joint, and I met you and I was kind of just delighted to meet another person who wasn't from CalArts.
Yeah. Yeah, like you can make it. Like I come from nothing and nowhere, and I didn't go to film school. I didn't go to fancy animation school. I just made it
Now,
work.
when you got the job at Nickelodeon, on Chalk Zone, were you thinking to yourself at that time, I could make a career out of writing cartoons specifically, or were you thinking more in the broad sense of television and film?
At that time, it was television and film. I hadn't focused on animation specifically. It was a bit of a happy accident as it turned out.
And then, so what was your first writing assignment? You were
I love
writer's assistant, but when
Yes.
was the first time you got to dive into an actual script?
Well, I love this because this is something else that I share with whether folks I'm mentoring or folks who are trying to break in. They were extremely clear with me when I started. They were like, "Do not pitch us stories. You are here to be an assistant. Please don't do that because we really need." I was supporting two producers, Larry Huber and Bill Burnett, and the three writers. I think we had two or three, but they were like, that is what we need to be done. We need this support, and we need to get the thing shipped, and that's what we need to focus on. So I was like, cool, no problem. But Chalk Zone, if you remember, audience had 4 episodes in each 22-minute episode. So quite a lot of scripts had to be generated. And as wonderful and talented as the whole team was, one day they were short 1 script. And I hadn't shared it with anybody. I'd just been keeping a running log of story ideas. I would listen because I had to take notes in all the writers' meetings. So I was learning how they were pitching and what they were talking about and how they were coming up with stories. So I just kept a list of my own stories. And then one day they were like, "Oh my gosh, we have to turn in 1 more episode. And we don't have any." And I was like, I mean, I have some. And they were like, "Okay, this one time, but not again." And I was like, absolutely no worries, no problem. I'm just happy to be here. And then that was successful. I continued to honor the job for which I was hired. And then I freelance wrote this episode, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, okay, you can do like 1 more." And then I was like, "Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much."
Which one was it? Which one was that first one?
The very first one was I can't remember the title, but it was about the star as a 3-minute one, and Snap, or 4 minutes, however long they were. And Snap was trying to make a wish on the star. It might have been called Twinkle Twinkle. I can't. Wishy Washy. Wishy Washy was. I think it was. Was it called Wishy Washy? I think so.
That sounds right.
It was 20 years ago. I don't remember. So then that happened a couple more times, and then at that point, because I was also managing my job appropriately, and my scripts were solid, they allowed me I effectively became like a regular freelance writer for the show, and that's how I got my first scripts.
Now you'll note, aspiring writers, that she was good at the job that she got hired for, and dare I say you were exceptional at the job, because again, one of the things they do, that does happen in particular, is if you get a job like that in a studio, my goodness, the first thing everybody starts doing is telling you their pitch and telling you their show idea and telling you they're this, that, and the other. And you did it exactly right. You did your job well. You did your job very well. You ingratiated yourself amongst the gang.
Yeah.
And when the time came, you were ready.
Yes.
You weren't like, "Let me go home and I'll do it." You had it right there. So
yes. Yeah.
I hope, again, I hope all of the aspiring writers paid close attention to that. So what came after Chalk Zone?
So after Chalk Zone, I went on to Fatherhood, but I was only doing production on Fatherhood. And then a very kind board artist turned director went over to Disney JetX and was like, "Hey, do you want to come with?" And I was like, "Yeah." And yeah, so thank you.
It was yin yang. Yeah, no,
starting my career.
People, you know, every time people do that, it delights me, but I'm also, you know, tempted to reveal the truth of the matter, which is, you know, I never hire anybody or recommend anybody as a favor to them. I do it because I know they're going to make my life easier. So don't thank me because it's selfish. Well, what I mean, the way that went was, you know, me, Bob Boyle, and Steve Marmel all got plucked by Disney to do this show that not nearly enough people watched, but that everybody should go back and rewatch, called Yin Yang Yo. And when Steve Marmel, you know, was putting together a team of writers, or when we were just plain talking about it, he to his credit asked me, you know, do you know anybody? And by the way, by this time I had been the supervising director on the Fairly Odd Parents, so I had not just gone from storyboarding to directing. Like, I had a history with Steve, and he knew that I knew what a good writer looked like and what a good, you know, what a good script looked like. And you know, when he asked me, I'm like, well, two people right out of the gate that I'm going to say are Aydrea Walden and Eric Trueheart. Now, I didn't know Sid Ventress before then, but he wound up, you know, coming on as well. And man, what a powerhouse team of writers.
No,
And
fun.
you can talk all you want. And I mean, Steve certainly, you know, was involved in every single script, but he was the executive producer of the show. You know, he would often, you know, the writer's room was, generally speaking, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was you, me, Eric, and Sib.
Yeah.
And that was, and again, I give Marmel credit for this, because it was one of the few productions I've worked on where in the writer's room sat the director. You know, so that anytime you guys came up with anything that I was like, no, we can't, because we were doing the show in Flash and people were still really passionate about Flash. And nobody, you know, and there was no reason why you, Eric, and Sib should know what the capabilities of Flash are and aren't.
Sure.
But I got to, you know, me, who had also been proven to be at least competent as a storyteller, got to sit in, and we would work together, as opposed to this very segregated system that the animation industry had been working on for years and years and years. So so that was a fun experience. And again, I would encourage everybody. What were some of your, do you remember the names of some of your Yin Yang Yo episodes? Or, I mean, you were involved in all of them at some point.
Yes. Mine specifically. Ooh. Oh, This Yang Is Not Brought to You By, which I think was one of my favorites, because it was Yang getting really excited about a video game and staying like waiting in line for a really long time, and you know, villains showed up. I think the Minotaur was mine. I think
did you wind up writing, because one of the few concept pitch, I say few, I mean, I think there were 2 or 3 concepts that I pitched. Marmel called me literally one time at like 6 o'clock in the morning, which, you know, by LA standards, that's unheard of.
That's too early.
He was like, we need, you know, 3 more outlines to pitch for scripts. I'm short 3. When you, by the time you come in, can you have a bunch for me to choose from? And one that I pitched that he actually chose, and for some reason I feel like you might have been the one who got handed this, was the High She's, which was,
that sounds very familiar.
It was Lady Pirates, and
I feel like I remember researching a lot of pirate jokes at about that time.
Yeah, I'm almost certain you were involved in that one, because it was
one
of those stories that the title was created before the story was.
Yes.
Like, oh, I got an idea. Lady Pirates, the High She's.
Love it. The High She's, love it. Yeah.
But and you know, as long as I'm talking about Easter eggs, and as long as I've got it in front of me, I forget where it's placed, but somewhere, because Chalk Zone has a huge following.
That's
like,
wonderful.
I felt at the time like, here's this modest little show. It did okay, but it was never like gargantuan hit. But man, you look around on Twitter and people loved that show.
Yay.
Somewhere in the show at some point, I don't know if it was a book, I don't know if it was a movie title in the background of a thing, but at some point it hit me that your name, if you add a couple more letters onto it, it almost becomes a palindrome of Aydrea's Daydream.
Yes, that sounds
And
right. Yes.
I put that somewhere in a show.
Yes.
So if anyone's listening,
I do know that. Yes, I love it.
that was my little nod to Aydrea, because she and I were becoming friends as, like I said, the
Yes.
kind of outsiders. But anyway, okay, so Chalk Zone, Yin Yang Yo, what comes next?
Well, then there came a pause, because this is also something that happens sometimes. Work goes away and you are out of the industry for a little while. So I was. Things happened. It was during this was like in 2008. So it was the height of the recession and the writer strike of 2008. And that job went away for me. And yeah, I was out of the industry for a couple of years, and I was back to doing survival jobs and day jobs and things like that. And eventually I kind of had to start my career over again. And that was very scary and sad and really hard. And I remember, there are all, every year these lists come out that are like 25 under 25 and 30 under 30. And it is really exciting for young people. But I know one of the great pressures that I felt was like, oh my gosh, I have to win an Oscar by 30. But at 30, I was unemployed after having worked in the industry for a while, after having scripts with my name on it.
Yeah.
And I was down to, I was living in a terrifying apartment. My car had been stolen. I was down to no dollars in my bank. I was a lot in debt. I was making decisions like, do I buy gas or food? My car was recovered. So at some point I was like, do I buy gas or food today? Doing the thing where you're like, well, I'm going to buy this bag of chips because it's $3, like a giant bag of chips because it's $3. And it'll feed me for maybe 2.5 days. And I thought I was going to have to go. And I went to a party. My friend was a stand-up, and I went to go see him do stand-up for his birthday. And while I was there, I started chatting to a woman who was lovely. And she was like, what do you do? I was teaching driver's ed at the time. That's what was going on. And I was like, well, I'm teaching driver's ed, but I was on this path. And now, I don't know, I kind of trying to figure it out. 2 weeks later, that woman who I had met exactly one time was like, hey, one of my clients, she was a hairstylist. She was like, one of my clients is a producer at DreamWorks, and she's looking for an assistant. Would you like me to connect you? And I was like, yes, please. So I spent probably 2 solid days perfecting my cover letter, sent it to this producer, did not hear back from her for a week, and was like, oh man, that was my last chance. I guess I got to go home. My mother was living in Tyler, Texas by that time. And I was like, I guess I'm going to go to Tyler, Texas and like get a job at a mall and like see what happens. And then, one last ditch effort, I emailed the producer and said, hey, just checking in to see if you got my application materials. No worries either way. The position may be filled. And she was like, no, I've just been really busy. Come in tomorrow for an interview. And then I prepped for that interview like I have never prepped before, and drove into the gates of arriving at the old Nickelodeon building back in 2002 when I started was incredible because it was such a distinct building, and the DreamWorks feature animation campus is very similar. It's just this beautiful. I just remember driving to the gates and being like, oh my gosh, this has to work. And I was so scared and I was so nervous, but that I nailed the interview and got that job and started over again as an assistant. And it was the same thing. Like, you are an assistant, please don't. I mean, there were programs inside the studio to like pitch things to development if you wanted to, but I was just very concerned with getting my stability back and getting my feet back under me. And so that's how I started over again. And then during this time, parallel to everything I was doing, even earlier when I was still at Nickelodeon, I started taking sketch classes and improv classes. Sketch is always also really great because it's so short and you have to get to the game of the sketch so fast. That sketch was great for my writing. Improv, it was Yin Yang Yo that sent me to improv class because all of y'all were so like bold. Well, when you were all men, which is just a true dynamic, and we're all like bold and more experienced than I was, and so it was just like this constant like pitch fest, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. So I started studying improv to learn how to become more vocal and outgoing in the room environment. So while I was rebuilding my career, I was taking sketch, I was taking improv, I was taking stand up. I ran a different blog for a long time. I developed a one woman show that I put up out of that. I did, I started Black Girl in a Big Dress during my career at DreamWorks. I was at DreamWorks for 8 years, like worked my way up the production ladder, and then had an opportunity to go work as a development executive, actually. So I left DreamWorks after 8 years. Before I left DreamWorks, also, I ran a comedy club inside of DreamWorks. One of our artists, who was amazing, one day popped up, like, didn't ask anyone's permission. DreamWorks was a wild place back in the day. It was a wild place. And one of our artists popped up this underground comedy club, and I used to help him with it. And then he left and gave me the keys to the kingdom, basically. So then I started running it at the same time that new studio leadership came in. And so I made friends with new studio leadership, and I was and the artist who started it also helped me do this. So the new head of the studio used to come to our shows. The head of development used to come to our shows. The head of casting used to come to our shows. So, and I was hosting everything. So it was the opportunity for me to do my bits and my performance. And they got to, those folks, those powers that be, got to know me through that. And I have been able to work with them outside of DreamWorks since that time, which has been great. But all of that practice and credits and accolades and bona fides, I optioned a show during that time. I was writing all the time. I would pick up a freelance script every now and then. So I was at DreamWorks for 8 years, was a development executive for about a year, and then had the opportunity to go back to Disney Junior and start writing full time. And that was in February 2020, when I was like, how lovely, we'll be in this office forever. And then March 2020 happened, and we were no longer in the office. But yeah, and now it's been just this great, and then the momentum picked up. I had a lot more skills in both in terms of writing and also in networking and building relationships and looking for work. And so the momentum has kept up since then.
Now, see, it's what a lot of this, because I've been out of California for the past, 15 some odd years. But like, what's fascinating about all this is, the fact that everything kind of came tumbling down at one point, forcing you to rebuild it. I feel like you almost rebuilt it into something better than it would have been if you hadn't had it come from in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I would encourage, people who are interested in breaking into the industry to pay close attention to, is this whole time. And even when you were at Yin Yang Yo, see, I guess I didn't know you were taking improv while you were at Yin Yang Yo, because you kept up with the three of us so well, particularly Trueheart and I, because Trueheart and I by that time had known each other for a long time, and we had this whole thing. So, which was probably like wildly obnoxious to anybody who saw. And then if Marmel walks in the room, forget about it. But
yes, of course.
But you were taking improv, and that's another one of those things where, and I not only tell this to writers, but I also tell this to especially storyboard artists. I'm like, take improv, because one of the only reasons I think that I was able to advance my own career in the fashion that I did was because I'm really good at pitching. And when I got on Fairly Odd Parents and I would pitch my storyboards, my goal was to get as few notes as possible. And the way to do that was to get as many laughs as possible during the pitch. And whereas most board artists would get up there and pitch and they'd be all shy and they'd be all like, and then this happens, I'd be doing the voices and this, and consequently, when, everyone would leave the room and it would just be me, Steve, and Butch, and they started getting all notesy, I'd have to think on the fly and try and give them why we shouldn't do their notes and we should just keep it exactly the way it is. So again, writers, artists, journalism, improv, do them. And again, you'll know Aydrea did not just sit around. You know, you were making relationships, and you were, this was not about, I mean, it was, you knew people, but you also were proactive.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's like knowing people. It's knowing people, but it's also bringing things to the table. It's not simply knowing people. Like, you
right.
can be as delightful as you can be, but if you aren't, if you don't have, it doesn't really matter how lovely you are as a person. You need pages that are good to get hired, and you need to. It's helpful to learn. It's not just like, oh, I know that person and they're going to maybe give me a job. It's like, oh,
Right.
that person's talking about their work in a way that I haven't thought about my work. Oh, I'm learning something from them. Oh my gosh,
Right.
I like when I there was a period of time when I left DreamWorks. I left to go to a job, and I'll be very honest, I got antsy and I got a verbal offer for a job, but not a paper offer. And I was like, that's fine. And so I quit. And then something happened at the other company, and they were like, oh, we can't actually offer you this right now. And I was terrified, and I thought I had made a career-ending mistake. So I just started talking to people in my network and being honest. And people were like, that happens all the time. You'll find another job. And I was like, this happens? And people were like, yeah. And then people would share stories, and you're like, oh, this thing that I'm experiencing isn't as scary as I thought it was. Oh, okay. And so like, that's also part of the networking, is just learning more about the texture of the industry and how it actually works.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny. I mean, there was a period there, post Yin Yang Yo, where I couldn't get hired to work in house at a studio. I was mostly doing freelance, and that's sort of where I kind of became the king of pilots. Like, everyone would hire me to either board or direct their pilots, but nobody, nobody wanted to sit next to me in the offices, and that's when I really got the hint. But the point being is, sometimes you in the industry, you need to recreate your career, and there will be periods where you get long dry spells, and some of them will make you second guess. And I too went through a period that I haven't even talked about publicly yet, where my whole life/career came crumbling down, and I had to rebuild from scratch too.
Yeah.
But as a result, I'm better at it than I ever would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
And I love hearing stories like that, because, again, too often I think that people expect that once they see their name in the credits on a TV show, they figure that's it. You're set for life. And that's not.
Just the beginning.
That's not
the beginning. Yeah.
Now, we got to bring this up because it's so very relevant to what's going on currently. Tell us about Barbie.
Oh, Barbie. Barbie is a great brand. I have done a few different. I have done 3, I would say, unique projects for Barbie. The first one was when I was at Peacock Kids, I think is what it is called now, and we did some digital shorts. It was for also for young audiences, and it was kind of sketch comedy with Barbie dolls. And so we were writing sketches for, I'm so sorry, phone is blowing up. I'm so popular. We were doing sketch comedy with the literal physical dolls. And it was really fun. And we had this, I was trying to remember the name of it. And I'm so sorry to all the wonderful people who worked on it. I can't remember the name of the show, but if Peacock Kids and like Barbie sketches, you'll find it. But one of the things that was so cool was we had these set designers and these folks who were really skilled at working on like miniature sets, because we'd make like Barbie sized sets like overnight. And then and it wasn't stop motion. It was kids' hands. It was toy plays with the type of the medium is. And it was incredible to see. And they did really some amazing things. And some of them were just purely funny. Some of them were really sweet. That was really fun. And that was my first interaction with the sort of Barbie machine. Then I did a piece for Barbie. So Barbie also has a vlog. If folks are not familiar, Barbie has a vlog. And I would say there's a good chunk of the blog that is like, hey, here's a room tour, or here's a recipe, or here's A day in my life as Barbie, but they also have quite a number of pieces that are really that are lightly political or about real social issues. Like there's one where Barbie talks about, the female trait of apologizing over nothing. Like, oh, I'm so sorry, that seat's taken. Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry, I bumped you. Oh, I'm so sorry. And she talks about how like, hey, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't need to apologize unless I've done something wrong, and I'm going to, stop doing that. I think she has one where she talks about being anxious or depressed. And so in the height of the summer of 2020, with the fallout from George Floyd, they wanted to do one about racism. And the Mattel team was incredible. They were basically like, we want to do this. We want it to be in Nikki's voice. That was, oh my gosh, it is Nikki. Oh my gosh, I hope I'm not misspeaking. So it wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to be it was not going to be Barbie talking about racism. It was going to be her friend who is Black talking about racism. And they were like, what would you like to say? And they kind of just let me say exactly what I wanted to say. And the only note that I didn't like was that, so what I wanted to say was, one of the experiences I think is really wild is when I, a person of color, am with a friend of mine who is white, and we are having two separate experiences in the same space because something is happening to me that is not happening to them. And so I was like, I think that's something that's really difficult for people to recognize as happening and do anything about. A really quick example, just for the sake of understanding the sketch. I was with my partner at the time who was white, and we had gone into a store to get some ice cream, and there were two options. You could either wait in the long line if you were going to get scoops, or if you were going to get a pint, which was what we were doing, you could just walk on in. He walked on in because we were getting pints. Nobody said a word. I followed him in, and this line of people start screaming at me. And I even tried to explain. I was like, no, I'm just blah, blah. And they were screaming at me. He, meanwhile, was like, getting his pints of ice cream. And then the line has now moved inside the store. So in order to get to the cashier, you have to cross through this like phalanx of people. And they let him go on through. And then I follow him. And this woman like posts up, and she's not going to let me through. And I was like, oh, my boyfriend is, I just can't get. And finally her daughter was like, Mom! And she let me go. And she's like, oh. She was so upset. So that's what was my pitch. And my boyfriend had no idea any of this was happening because nothing was happening to him, because he was just like, I'm getting ice cream, I'm going over there. Like, and I wasn't like screaming or shouting or crying or anything. So like he didn't, and he was also not being impeded anyway. So he didn't, he just didn't know. So that's what I wanted to do the Barbie vlog about, was Barbie's friend was going to explain these instances, and Mattel was completely supportive. And the only note they had was I had 3 examples, but for time, we had to cut 1. So there were 2. And I was like, it's not the rule of 2s, it is the rule of 3s. The rhythm of the sketch is off. But other than that, it was a perfect experience. And then I also wrote for, there's a series called Barbie, It Takes Two on Netflix that is Barbie and their names are Malibu and Brooklyn. It's Barbie and Barbie, the one we're most familiar with, and another Barbie who is Black, but her name is also Barbie. The conceit of the show is that they end up at this performing arts school together and become best friends. And so I got to write a few episodes of that show, and that was super fun as well.
This is all really interesting, because I feel like probably a lot of people would run under the assumption that working for Mattel is really hard, and that they were, that they would probably just hands in everything that you wrote and blah blah blah. But it sounds like it was a really like
I mean, I would say both things can be true. They're very, it's understandably, it's a legacy brand. They're protective of the brand. They have a lot to say, but it never felt like malicious or like cluttering it up just to clutter it up. It's like there are a lot of rules, but in the way that, like, if you are going to work with Mickey Mouse, there's going to be a whole bunch of information, like these are the exact colors, this is exactly how he moves, these are things he would say, these are things he would never say. And
Right.
so that definitely exists. But
Yeah.
I think, the vibe was like, I think they wanted to keep the brand relevant. And even if you
Sure.
look at the line of dolls, um, the dolls have become much more inclusive,
Yeah.
and so yeah.
Well, Barbie has always been a progressive brand. They have
Mhm.
they've always aspired to be on the forefront of you know that, for
Yeah.
lack of a term. They've
Yeah.
they've always wanted to be they wanted to be the ones who break ground, as opposed to people who are kind of late to the party. So
Right.
you know Barbie was one of the first girl dolls to become an astronaut and to
Yeah.
neuroscientist and all that stuff. So
She does a lot of jobs. She has a lot of
yeah,
jobs.
she does. Oh, if you were to look at my daughter's playset, you would see a million jobs. Yeah, no,
Oh.
it's funny because, and this will segue into the next show I want to talk about, because it relates directly to my daughter, who has, boy, it's a real sort of moment in a dad's life when he puts together the Barbie dream house on Christmas Eve.
Oh, so
But
sweet.
has to carry it down a flight of stairs so that it is under the tree
Yeah.
without waking her up. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Good job, Dad.
thank you. We'd not only watched a lot of this, because Barbie has a ton of cartoons on Netflix that she
Yeah.
has enjoyed, but we were watching a show, about a year ago or so, if not a little bit less than that. Um, uh, called Ada Twist Scientist, and I saw the name Aydrea Walden on that. And I said,
That's me.
That's your." I didn't have an opinion about a lot of like preschool,
Mm,
young age cartoons until I had a young daughter,
that's very
myself.
fair.
So tell
Yes.
us about Ada Twist.
It just was great. That was also a really great experience. It was in the Chrisney universe, and headed up by Cary Grant, who was fantastic. What was hard about the show is that they really want to talk about science in a real way, but for kids. And it's hard to take some big science concepts and make them accessible. I did do an episode. I don't know if that episode, I think I'm not gonna talk about that episode. I don't know if that episode is out yet, about a really big concept that was really hard to talk about for little kids. But no, they were super great. That team was wonderful and really kind and really generous. And yeah, I think the hardest thing was like getting caught up on science and for the first time in a long time, and being like, oh right, this needs to be basically correct. Because I worked on some other shows that allow the science to be a little more magical, and this show was a little more precise.
Right.
And that was, and that's a really interesting skill set, to take some concept and put it in the mouths of children who are speaking to children younger than them, and figure out how to
Yeah.
still make it fun, and how there are jokes and
Sure.
there's physicality. Yeah, but it was fun. It was a good show.
Well,
And we were nominated and that crew was nominated for an Emmy. So I got to go to the Emmys for the first time, which
nice.
was fun.
Gee, I imagine you had a good time picking out a dress.
I did have a great time picking out a dress. Yes. I rented the runway and had a fantastic time. I got to walk my first like press line with like a red carpet where
Nice.
people are like, look over here, look over here. I was like, oh my gosh, how fun. It was fun.
Now what again is kind of interesting about that, and what I've come to appreciate, more, especially now that I have a young daughter and everything like that, is, it's easy to look at cartoons for young kids. Something like Ada Twist, as you said, you are relaying actual science, and you're doing it to a younger audience, and you have to make it entertaining, which you guys obviously did, with a vengeance, because you kept. She is really, really wound up and does going to bed. That's the show that sort of helps quiet her mind, and she loves those characters, and the characters all. So again, for junior writers out there, for aspiring writers out there, some of some of the best work you'll probably ever challenges you in a way that you probably can't foresee, because again, you like um writing not only real science but for kids in an entertaining way. I mean, that's a triple whammy.
It's a lot. And those shows tend to have pretty sizable orders as well. So you're also doing it pretty quickly, which is a lot going on. But it's also nice because those shows also tend to be quite beloved and have, you know, kids consume a lot, which is great for us. So it's kind of nice. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes if you're on, you know, certain prestige adult shows, fewer people in your orbit, it's kind of a weirder thing to be like, oh my gosh, I, you know, worked on this thing, and people are like, have never heard of it. But so many people have heard of the stuff that comes out for kids, in part because of the marketing machine and the merch machine behind it, but because people have kids and kids watch a lot of stuff.
Now I'm interested. This is catching up literally 20 something years.
Yes.
I know, I do remember one of the first things you and I chatted about was you had something you wanted to pitch to Nickelodeon, and we had talked about teaming up, and I would do some artwork for it and blah blah blah. Do you pitch shows? Do you aspire to that? Or
I do pitch. I have seriously taken out one project, and that journey has so far taken about 1.25 years, and gotten a lot of good feedback, but we haven't sold it yet. I optioned a show once. It ended up being kind of an accident, but when that happened, I remember I had taken about 15 years for me to do that. And I remember speaking to some students, and they were like, oh my gosh, was it hard to sell that show? And I was like, well, for 15 years, it was pretty difficult. And then one day it was less difficult. And just speaking to like the long road that this career is. And I feel like pitching is a little different, at least for me right now, than it was 20 years ago, partly because when you are inside a studio, it is, I don't want to say it's easier, but there are sort of clearer, direct channels to pitching to the powers that be when you are a full-time employee of that studio. And and that's great. And at least back in the day, at studios I worked at, it was a pretty straightforward process. It doesn't mean they were going to buy it, but they were aware that their people wanted to pitch stuff. So there were pretty clear mechanisms for getting to do that. Being on the outside, I have found that it's just a different process. So the show that I'm in the process of pitching now is a live action show. So that's also a little more complicated in terms of like getting a production company on board, and then getting a studio on board, and then needing to get a distributor on board. And the pitch is very verbal. I don't have a pilot script. I don't have any original visuals for it, and that seems to be working so far. I have been the writer on a number of things in development that other people kind of started, and then they brought me in to write the pilot or whatever pitch materials. So I've also done quite a bit of that. Many of those have not gone forward. At least one has. And that's such an interesting process because it still just takes a lot of time. You can be kind of kicking around this one, the show that did go forward, we did have a script, and we're kind of kicking that one 11-minute script around for, 1 year, 2 years. But it did go. So.
Yeah, well, great.
Yeah.
That's another one of those things that I feel like a lot of people don't really realize, is that in the animation industry, they figure, oh, you have a job as a storyboard artist, or you have a job as a writer, and you're on your show, and that's your job forever, or that's the type of job you do forever. There are a lot of show adjacent things that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There was a period at Disney where I was their like script doctor or show fixer. When they had a pilot that wasn't going the way they wanted it to, they would bring in and have me. There's all kinds of stuff like that you can literally make a career out of.
Yes, there are so many writers, who you have never had a show on the air, but they develop a lot, and they
Yeah.
get paid to do it, and it's cool.
And without them, the system all crumbles.
Yeah.
I feel like, well, I don't feel like, it's an objective fact that I haven't let Rusty ask any questions.
Oh,
Isn't
no,
that
no, you're
correct? You're
good.
so mean.
Nah, he's good. I just like to
I'm
listen.
obnoxious.
I call myself DJ Khaled because I bring all this together, and he doesn't really do much either. He just shouts out some stuff every now and again. So
I
Oh my gosh.
I said on our first episode that, and I have stuck by this for every episode, that I will not prepare for a single episode of this show, and I'm just going to show up and I'm going to talk until somebody shuts me
Just
up.
chitty chat. Just chitty chat. It's just
It is
just doing some life.
Yeah, it is a little tougher for me to shut my yap when I'm talking to friends that I haven't seen in 20 some odd years.
I know, it's exciting. It's exciting.
yeah,
to
I'm
catch up.
I'm just excited to be here. Like I said, I'm just some dude that lives in Texas, and it's cool to be a part of these conversations. So I just feel
Well,
blessed to be a part of it.
there are people that I was acquaintances with in LA, and then there are people, when after I got married and my wife and I got a house, Adria's been to our house parties, which we threw a couple
That's
dudes.
true. That's true.
So what now? What's on your plate? You mentioned something in Nickelodeon that you can't talk about. Please
That's
talk
true.
about it.
We are waiting. That show is still in post, and are waiting for whatever announcement gets made so that we can talk about it. But I was story editor on that show, writer and story editor of that show, and that was really fun. And then after that show wrapped, I actually did about 8 months in live action. I was on a sitcom, and then I did a movie, and now I'm doing some animation freelance, and excited to welcome in the next big thing.
Did I miss it, or are you not naming names of your sitcom?
Oh, I don't know why I didn't say it. That was very weird. That was a weird, when I was making that choice, I was like, why am I doing this? I think you just get so used to, like, we work on so much stuff that hasn't been released yet or hasn't been announced yet. But no, I worked on the iCarly reboot. And so we just finished the 3rd season. My episode comes out. Well, I don't know when this is airing, so never mind. Yeah, so I worked on the 3rd season of that show, and it was really fun. Totally different experience. The room was so different than an animation room. I definitely felt like a big ol' beginner again. But it was fun. It was fun to see, and that show has a huge fandom, so it's been really fascinating to watch the active fandom of that show while it's happening. The animation takes so long that even the movie I can't talk about. That is not it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's seeing it again, your live action experience just goes to show, you can just feel like you're getting settled in your career, and then you get thrown into something where you are once again the odd person out.
Yes. I feel that I am that way a lot. Which is fine, but I we're talking about being at Nickelodeon. We didn't go to fancy schools. I mean, UT is a lovely institution, and I think that UT is better now than it was when I was there. So I think I've gotten some benefit of people being like, "Oh my gosh, UT," and I'm like, "Ew, yeah, it's
definitely it's definitely all right.
It's a good place." But yeah, I didn't go to film school, didn't do anything fancy, and yeah, so I often feel like I'm the odd person in the room. I'm also extremely happy, and sometimes industry folks can get mired in the righteous cynicism, and I'm like, I don't know, friends, I'm just really happy to be here.
Is there anything that you want to promote or anything like that? Anything that you have that you're doing, personal projects, anything you're selling, anything like that? Do you have any wares, any goods?
Yeah. You're gonna have a garage sale anytime soon?
This couch I don't need anymore, if anybody wants that. No, I mean, Black Girl in a Big Dress is not new anymore, but I certainly love it when people watch it. As soon as this Nickelodeon show goes, it'll be great to announce that. Yes, please watch iCarly. I did actually, what was it again? Some other things that I'm involved with. I also help women in animation run their mentorship program. So if folks are looking for mentorship opportunities or the chance to join a very cool community that does a lot of events, a lot of different styles and types of events. I would highly recommend checking out Women in Animation. They are a very active group. Yeah, has this been helpful? Have I been useful?
Yeah, this was awesome. No, I appreciate you
Okay, good.
coming on. And since you have projects that you've got that you're
Hey, by the
waiting
way,
to talk
guys,
about, now that we know you have things that aren't out yet, whenever they do come out, if you want to come back on and talk about it, we'd love to have you on as a
Oh,
guest again.
fun.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
cool. Yeah. Um,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in
Yay.
fact, I mean, look, nothing would make me happier than to get you, Sib, Eric, and Steve all
Oh,
at
how
the same time into
fun.
and
A little
I
reunion.
but you know, fingers crossed, we'll see. Do a whole yin yang
Anything's
yo
po-
reunion.
Anything's possible.
Talk about what went wrong. Yes. Seriously, people, everyone go back and watch that show. It's
It
got to
was
be
a
somewhere.
fun show. That was a
It
fun
was.
show. It was a really fun show.
Well, Aydrea, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's been wonderful seeing you again. We would definitely love
Thank
to
you.
have you on again. And
Yeah, thank you
Yes,
so
I'll be
much.
My goodness.
back. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. It's been nice.
just don't be a stranger. And I'm gonna go ahead and let Rusty take us out. So zig zig ah, party people.
All righty, everybody. That's been another episode of Animation Conversation. Thanks everybody for watching, and stay tuned for more animation conversations.
And that brings us to the end of another incredible episode of Animation Conversation. We hope you enjoyed this animated adventure as much as we did. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us on our social media channels or through good old-fashioned email. We value your input and want to make Animation Conversation a podcast that resonates with animation lovers like you. Our Instagram and Twitter are @AnimationConvo. Our YouTube is @AnimationConversation. Our email is theanimationconvo@gmail.com. Before we say our final goodbyes, we want to remind you to stay animated. Keep exploring, appreciating, and sharing the magic of animation with others. Let your imagination soar and let the world of animated wonders continue to inspire and captivate you. Thank you once again for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, this is Wubcake, signing off for Animation Conversation. Keep watching, keep dreaming, and keep the animation conversation alive.